Welcome to Claims Navigation, a channel where we discuss insurance-related claims. My name is Ben Oguleye. I'm an insurance adjuster with over 27 years experience, and I am bringing to you a continuation of coverages under the typical Canadian homeowners policy. And today we're going to be talking about coverage D, which pertains to loss of use of your dwelling. This particular topic is quite important, especially when you think about global events, climate change, forest fires, and all that kind of stuff that would cause people to be evacuated or sent out of their homes. And certainly, if you have insurance, your policy should be able to provide coverage for instances like that. The first coverage under this coverage D is the additional living expense. So this coverage essentially would give you coverage for loss resulting from an insured peril that requires you to move away from your house. So what the policy would cover would be the increase in living expenses and moving expenses incurred by you. So if you need to move out of your house because of an insured peril could be fire, water damage, if you have flood coverage, it could be arson, it could be whatever is covered under your policy, and makes your house inhabitable, your policy would certainly cover that expense if you have the ALE coverage. ALE is the acronym for additional living expense. And what this covers is the increase in your normal expenses. So the first is if you needed a temporary accommodation. It could be an hotel, it could be Airbnb, it could be a rental property that you need to stay in after a loss. Your policy would cover that expense. Now, just to clarify something, if you have a mortgage on your house, most Canadians do, you still need to continue paying your mortgage. What your policy would cover is the cost of the new or temporary residence that you're going to be staying in until your repairs is completed. Now, from my experience, this coverage typically reflects the standard of your house, and I've had claims where we paid over $10,000 a month for additional living expenses because the insured in those instances would live in a big mansion, and they would need something that reflects that status, and it's also reflected in the policy limits. So if it's a standard house, the policy would probably pay standard rates for hotel or residence. Sometimes we've put people in condominium buildings, sometimes it's townhouses, something to have a roof over your head until your house is ready. The policy would also cover increases in your normal expenses. So for example, if your typical grocery bill per week in your primary residence is $400, and as a result of this event that made you leave your house, now you're spending about $600 a week on groceries, your policy will cover the $200 difference. So you still need to continue with your normal expenses. The policy only picks up the increase in your normal expenses. Now, I've had experiences where the insured sort of saw this as a, go out and party kind of coverage, which it's not. And a lot of times, people may not properly understand that the policy is only covering what the excess of what you would normally spend. So it's very important to note that. Now, this coverage, the payment is only for a reasonable time required to rebuild or repair your dwelling. So as long as the repairs is done within a reasonable time, the policy will continue to cover that. Now, I've had experiences where insureds delay the repairs. Maybe there's a dispute about the estimate amount, and like they sort of wanted to clear that out first before proceeding with the repairs. My only advice under those circumstances is that you make sure, because the meter is running essentially, so you need to make sure that you don't exhaust the limits on your additional living expense coverage, and by the time you now get around making a decision as to repairs, you've exhausted all that money, and now you got to incur that money out of pocket. So just make sure that you make decisions quickly, and you get the repairs done quickly. And it also depends on the type of damage that we're talking about. In future video series, I'm going to take on the topic of forest fires, how it impacts you, and how to deal with that type of situation. So, and the coverage also extends to permanent relocation. So if you permanently need to relocate as a result of an insured peril that caused damage to your primary dwelling, the additional living expense would pay the cost of transportation, moving you from the old house, if there's still anything left to move from there, and will resettle you, the cost of resettling into a new permanent location, and whatever cost that is incurred for that move will be covered under the additional living expenses. And so the key rule is this: the policy only pays the excess between your normal expenses and not covers everything. So just keep that in mind. So that would be the coverage under additional living expense. The second coverage under coverage D is the fair rental value. This is very important for people who rent or intend to rent part of their primary dwelling. So typical homes in Canada have a basement, and a lot of people would rent out that basement for extra income. My only caution or advice is that it's always good for your insurance company to know that you have that type of operation, you have a tenant in your basement. It makes things more tidy in case you have a claim, and there are no disputes about misrepresentation or material change in risk, which is something we'll talk about in future videos. So for the fair rental value, the coverage is for any loss due to an insured peril that makes part of the dwelling rented to others or held for rental by you unfit for occupancy. So it's either you're renting the basement or intend to rent the basement or property. It doesn't have to be a basement. It could be a room in your house that you intend to rent, and as a result of an insured peril, you cannot rent that place, or the tenant needs to move out, and there's a loss of rental income. So your policy would pay what is called a fair rental value, and typically adjusters would ask for your lease agreement, which would show what you are charging for the tenant, and if it's a property that was held in anticipation of rental, you may want to rent it for a certain amount, but what we do as adjusters is to figure out what is the general rental cost for that area where you reside, and we would use that as the measure for what a fair rental value is. And sometimes the opinion of a real estate agent is required to sort of make it official and give the insurance company guidance on what the fair rental value is going to be. Now, the payment under this coverage is for a reasonable time. Okay, and that reasonable time is the reasonable time it requires to repair your house and to put it back in the position it was prior to the loss. So as long as the repair is ongoing and it's done within a reasonable time, you will be compensated for the loss of rental income that you're losing as a result of that insured peril. It does not include expenses that does not continue while part of the dwelling rented place is undergoing repairs or is unfit for occupancy. So what that means is that ongoing expenses that ceased as a result of this loss will not be covered. It could be, for example, you have a cleaner that comes to the house to clean the rental property, let's say on a weekly or monthly basis, and say you're paying them $200. You have a contract with them that they're going to be coming to clean for a year, and then as a result of this insured peril, they can't come obviously because the place is not in a shape for cleaning. It's undergoing repairs, and you are contractually obligated to keep on making those $200 payments per month or per week, depending on what contract you signed. The policy would not pick up that expense because that activity has ceased, and until the repairs is completed, it's a contract that's outside the purview of your insurance policy, so it's not going to be covered. So that is it for fair rental value. And the third coverage under coverage D is the prohibited access by civil authority. And the wording for that says that if you are prohibited from accessing your house as a direct result of damage to neighboring premises by an insured peril under your policy, you get coverage for additional living expenses and fair rental value for a period of 30 days. So what that means is, for example, if there's a fire in your neighbor's house, and as a result of that fire, maybe the authorities have found highly volatile materials on that property, and for safety they have issued an order, evacuation order, perhaps for the entire street, and as a result of that you cannot go into your house. Your tenants also have to move out. The ALE, additional living expenses coverage, will be triggered, as well as the loss of your rental income. So your fair rental value, you will get that coverage, but under the civil authority directive, the coverage is only limited for 30 days. And after 30 days, it ceases, because your house may be in a habitable condition, but for safety reasons, the authorities have indicated that they want everybody on the street, perhaps, or the houses beside the subject property, to evacuate, and as a result of that, you don't have access to your house. So your policy would pay for that expenses that you incur. Now, the only exclusion to that is that there's no coverage for cancellation of a lease or agreement. So, for example, if as a result of that civil authority directive your tenant decides they're not coming back, and now you have a loss of rental income, that is not covered because the tenant is canceling the lease. That's a contractual dispute between yourself and your tenant, and your policy would not respond to that cancellation or the loss of rental income as a result of that cancellation. So I hope this helps somebody, and I would once again just encourage you to like, share, and subscribe. There's several videos I'm going to be doing, but I hope this helps a lot of people, especially if you have a tenant and if you have a loss that requires you leaving your house. You know what to expect and how to navigate that process, and that's why I call this claims navigation. So thank you very much. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video. Great.